The Ministry of Development is a teaching series produced by the Frank Group to assist leaders in the church and parachurch organizations in learning the biblical basis for stewardship and development. In this three-part DVD, John R. Frank, president of the Frank Group, discusses how to create a development strategy by relationships. While most organizations try strategy after strategy, John will show you how to look at relationships as the guiding priority in your development program. Along with the theory, proven tools and reports will be presented to assist you in implementing this strategy. And now, here's John R. Frank.
Do you ever wonder how you can combine your belief in relationships with all the strategies that we need to incorporate and run in our development programs to really walk our talk? We say we want relationships, but how do we make this thing work? I want to share with you some concepts that I've developed to be able to look at relationships and really honor them, really love them, really build connection strategies with them, and find strategies that will meet their giving, stewardship, philanthropic goals. And I call it Development Strategic Planning by Relationships. So first, I want to share with you some definitions to start at the foundation of why do we value a relationship? Why do we believe that the donor is important, more than just a necessary evil, more than just a source of money? And first definition is stewardship. Now, many of you may have heard of stewardship as, well, the annual tithe talk in a church or the annual budget talk and this type of thing. But I want to offer a different definition, that stewardship is living a lifestyle. This is a filter that we look at life, understanding that everything we have is from the Creator God. Whether it be our very easily recognized time, talent, and treasure, but also the very blood that runs through our veins, our relationships with our family and with other people, as well as our environment. We're here for a short time. And in that time, the owner, the Creator, wants us to be good stewards of everything that He's entrusted to us. And that is stewardship as a lifestyle. So as we look at a development strategy, we have to honor the steward's goals. We do this through a strategy called the Ministry of Development, which is defined as creating opportunities to connect God's people to God's work. In other words, the development strategies of our direct mail appeals, our banquets, our major donors, those aren't the end result. The money is not the end result. The real purpose in God's economy is that followers of Jesus, trying to be good stewards, will invest in your ministry and therefore achieve godly goals and eternal goals, well, things that have not only value today, but eternal value. And so that is a ministry, a development philosophy combined with a belief that stewards are part of God's strategy. Let's look at some biblical basis for this. First of all, we deal with the issue of ownership. We know what society says, grab all the gusto you can, he who dies with the most toys wins, etc., etc. It's all about me, 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 and I want to own it, I want to have it. We're in a time of accumulation. Randy Alcorn, in his book, The Treasure Principle, said we have a disease in America called affluenza. We just believe that everybody should be affluent. But really, what Scripture has to say is the earth is the Lord's and everything in it and all who dwell in it. So we see that God owns it all. He never changes the ownership. We are stewards. We are servants. We are to manage and take good care of what's been entrusted to us. The next thing is, should everybody be given the same thing? Should we have a development strategy that, maybe you've heard that myth, we need $100,000, let's just find 100 people who can each give $1,000? It's a myth because we're not all blessed the same. Deuteronomy 16 verse 17 says, each of you should give in proportion to the way the Lord your God has blessed you. That implies that we aren't all blessed the same. There are those to whom much is given and much will be required, and there are those that are very poor, like the widow's mite, but they are asked to give sacrificially and they'll be held accountable for what, as Paul says in 2 Corinthians 9, give according to what you do have, not according to what you don't have. So we are to give at different levels. And 2 Corinthians 8, chapters 8 and 9 are filled with wonderful things about stewardship. But chapter 8, verse 7, just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, see that you excel in the grace of giving. not dabble at, not if there's enough left over at the end of the month, that you excel, that we as followers of Jesus would be known not only as Christians by their love and people of faith that we're taught about, but that we are known as people of generosity, people that will give of themselves, because we understand who owns it, and why we are here on earth is to share it and to use it for good things. And finally, not that I'm looking for a gift, but I'm looking for what may be credited to your account. Paul is telling the church at Philippi that we should all remember that God is watching. And I believe one day we'll be before Him, and it's not going to be, let's count up the offerings and see how you did in the annual tithe talks, but it's going to be, I put you on earth, I gave you this, I gave you your health, I gave you this wisdom, I maybe gave you your degrees, I gave you your job, I gave you this ministry, I gave you this spouse, your children. What did you do with all of that for my kingdom? Or what did you do to take care of the least of these? That, I believe, is what will cause God to say, well done, good and faithful servant. So it is a life of stewardship, I believe, a stewardship filter, a lifestyle that God is calling each of us to live. As we look at development strategic planning, it is really critical now that more and more of our boards, more of our donors are saying, well, how do you know you're doing the right things? How do you know you're getting the best bang for the buck, what we call ROI, or return on investment? For every dollar you spend, how many dollars you're bringing in? And then we say, but we value a relationship. How can we do that? Historically, what we've done is we've looked at what works strategies. Oh, this organization does a jogathon. Let's do a jogathon. This organization does direct mail acquisition. Let's try that. This one does something, an ad in the paper. That seemed to, let's try that. So it tends to be what works, and it's year to year. But if we focus on relationships first, let's put our focus where God's is, on relationships. Because I believe that God is more concerned with the journey of the steward than He is with our goals and budgets. Think about that. God could supply at any time, and I've seen Him do it. Maybe you've seen Him do it. Miraculous gifts. But He doesn't do that most of the time. Most of the time, He wants to see His work done through His people. So the journey of the steward is what God values. And therefore, as a Christian ministry representing Jesus Christ's work here on earth, shouldn't we be putting our emphasis where we believe His emphasis is? On relationships, on His people. So the first question you should ask yourself in your organization, whether you're the executive director, president, or any of the development staff, or maybe it's a startup, or maybe you're a large organization and looking at this way to do your development strategy. How do you connect with your relationships now? Are you able to meet your donors in person? Do you have a way to talk to them? Now, if you're a local ministry, maybe that's not a problem, or even a regional. But if you're a national and international ministry, that may be more difficult. Are you getting in touch with them? Is it through special events? Maybe once a year or twice a year, the people come together, you see them at the tables, you talk to them, you play golf with them, it's an auction, whatever it may be. Is it a special event contact, which kind of maybe, hi, how you doing? What's happening this year? Yeah, have your people call my people, we'll get together for lunch. But it may not be really a relationship building time. Or is it through the mail? Kind of high technology, low touch, if you will, where we send them a letter, we write to them from the president's desk, and tell them about the ministry. But there's a certain distance, a certain technology there that's in between. Or do we have to admit, we do not get in touch with our relationships. We've just seen them as people interested. I mean, it's not that we've been callous, it's just that we haven't developed any way to really get to know them. It isn't a relationship. They are people who want to give to us, and we just kind of reactive development. We receive their gifts. Where do you miss your relationships? Analyze that. Where is our radar not even picking up that there's people that we've never even thought we should be in contact with? Could they be some of your major donors? I had a friend who was a vice president of a large organization, and he had a donor that was giving in the six figures, and when he started this organization, and he said that this person was kind of upset, so he sat down, he met the husband and wife. They just loved the organization, everything was great. He went back and checked their records. They had been giving six-figure gifts for 3 years, then nothing for the last 2 years. And they were upset because no one talked to them. No one explained to them what was going on in the organization. No one kept in touch with them. So they stopped giving because they lost relationship. They didn't lose their passion for the organization, its vision, what it was accomplishing. It just no one said they needed them, which is what a relationship is all about. So sometimes our radar isn't picking things up. Which of those do we not know how to contact? Maybe you've been just a special events organization. You see people there and you don't, well, how do we meet with them? How do we, what do we do? How do we know which ones are major donors, have the potential? How do we know any of this? We're going to talk about that and some of these tools and strategies, how you can analyze those. But I propose to you a new approach. We'll create a development strategy that focuses on relationships first, strategy second, and still meets your annual fund goals. In other words, it's not just going to be touchy-feely, let's just sit around and sing Kumbaya and hope the money comes in. And we're talking about you're still using sophisticated, focused, strategic development, but we're going to look at relationships first. Here is the chart that explains the whole philosophy. And we're going to go through this. And it starts in the upper left here with integration with organizational vision. And as it moves through into the donor research and segmentation, and we'll end up with 4 main relationship groups, as you can see here: major donors, core donors, impulse donors, and new donors. And that will give us a comprehensive integrated strategy, but we're not just going to stop there. We will then look at the projections of income for 5 years, and then 1 year, and then an annual calendar from which to walk our plan. Not just lay it out there and hope it comes true, but to really look at it every year. And then the final component is accountability. How do we report, evaluate, and adjust our written plan so that we can re-strategize here? So that is the overall flow chart. Now we're going to look at these individually as we walk through them. First of all, integration with organizational vision. Organizational vision is that front lines, is the heart of the ministry where a difference is made. And that is what people give to. It needs to come from the leadership of the organization, and it needs to be something that is inspiring and takes people to the future. Remember, people give to the future, they don't give to the past. The past only earns you the right to ask again. So people want to be giving to where you're going, and that's organizational vision. It's really important that development support that as opposed to have to create its own vision. The development considerations for all this would be all the different things that development would need to look at to support that organizational vision. Some areas to consider will be our strategies. Do we have enough strategies? Are we a startup that has a major thrust coming that we're going to really see some great growth? Are we needing to cut back, to refine, to get better? Are we going into a whole new country or a whole new program? What strategies? Bottom line, is there a gross income number? And I do say gross because development is measured by the total gifts people give. The net income is how well we managed it. So some people want to measure it by the net. Development officers must measure by what people give, which is gross income. But there may be a goal in 3 to 5 years, or a capital campaign may be coming. We need to take those things into consideration. How much staffing will that take? Development is all about relationships. And if we don't have the people to build and connect and develop those relationships, you can't just keep raising more income without more staff to do it. And then donors. How do we acquire new donors? It's understood that certain donors stop giving every year, a percentage. Sometimes it's a high percentage, sometimes it's a low percentage, depending upon the way that you acquired those donors. What's important is that you're constantly building new donors into your database and continuing to build those relationships. And systems. If you don't have systems of how do you work with a major donor, how do you work with monthly partners, how do you acquire a new prospect, how does your database record donor contacts, et cetera, if you don't have systems, you will find donors slipping through the cracks. So there must be good systems to undergird that. And then research. We must get to know our donors. It's not just to find out how much money they can give, but it's to find out about who they are, what they care about, what kind of relationship do they want with their nonprofits, with their ministries. Each person is different, and you don't want to just be getting a number. I received a direct mail appeal from one of my former clients, and it had John Frank and all the information. But on top of that was AM75-326. So I wrote to the president and said, thanks for remembering my first name. You know, just kidding. But it's one of those things that we want to get those numbers off there and really find out about people. Now let's take a look at donor research. Some of the things that we're going to look at now, once we have our vision, we know where development is going, is what are the types of donors? What kind of relationships do we have with them or desire with them? What is their history of giving? It might be that they are a long-time faithful donor. It might be that they're a brand new donor and they started giving in a certain way. What about new donors? Did they come on file at a banquet, a special event, golf tournament? Did they come in through one of our major donor relationships or one of our board members? Different types of ways to enter our file, as you might say. And then the types of research. Is this something where we took our database and we actually used a service to gain information from that? Is it something that we did some surveys of our own database? What are the types of research that you can get? And then we have databases and just internal knowledge of our people, that when you get together with a major donor research and rating, you sit down and say, who do I know? Well, how do I know them? Does this person know them? They play golf with them, they go to church together, this type of thing. It's just common sense information that assists us in building a relationship with them. Then segmentation. Segmentation is basically saying, let's not treat everybody the same way. Let's find a way to segment them into certain groups of people that we can be effective. Asking yourself, who are your donors? Are they different, everything from income levels to ethnicity to geography? Some of you international ministries, you might have to do it by geography, by zip code, different types of things. What do they care about? How do we find out what they care about? Well, there are certain ways we can do that. We have demographics and we have geographics. And this is called psychographics, where we understand the psychology of what is it they think, they care about, they value. And that's what we want to find out. And how do they want to have a relationship? How do they want to be contacted? Not just send everybody direct mail and then write in your newsletter, if you don't like this, go ahead and let us know and we'll change it. You know, that's the way we always did it. And now that is just too much shotgun approach. We need to do more segmented rifle approach, if you will, better focus. There's going to be a variety of relationships that they're going to want for us. Just within the major donor group, you're going to find people that say, I want you to contact me once a year every November. You're going to find some people that say, hey, give me a card on my birthday. I want a phone call every other month. Others will say, you know, just send me emails from time to time. And we have people in the major, when we talk major donors, that say, you know, they want to know, tell me about the children. Tell me the heart stories. Another one says, give me the finances. I want to know the finances. And then we have everything in between. And I always joke, there's always the donor that says, only come to see me when the moon is full and wear a blue dress. Now, you know, a little eccentric, and we can look at all the varieties of people and what they demand of us. And sometimes it is pretty crazy. But the whole point is we're trying to serve them. We're trying to connect them. But don't worry about the blue dress thing. Major donors. They give $1,000 or more within a calendar year, which is a certain hurdle. They live in different neighborhoods. You know, we keep saying in our society, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. There is that divide. We have middle income, but we do understand that there are people that give huge gifts in philanthropic circles and in ministry circles as well, but they do live in different neighborhoods. They drive different cars. They look at life differently. They look at how they value things, how they purchase things, how they, you know, some of them that maybe, we use the term born with a silver spoon, they've inherited money, as opposed to some communities I go in where their father or grandfather built this business. It's still an earned money. It's very different how people of wealth look at their wealth. And we need to learn it to know them. And they view their relationships with nonprofits through a different lens. They see themselves as leaders. They see themselves as what they do, others will follow. They see themselves as setting the standard. And many times they insist on being the first to give. And if they're not, they may hold it against you. They may not give if they're not contacted in the beginning. So there's certain things, yes, eccentric, quirky sometimes, but it's up to us to ask questions and get to know them. The core donors they give monthly, very disciplined. They're budget conscious. They can't give you a huge number of dollars at once, but they can be consistent in multiple years, not just 1-year increments. They're disciplined. They'll be with you every month, and they're faithful. They are saying that after their salary, they pay their mortgage or rent or whatever it may be, their car payments and their food, they're saying, every month I'm going to be with your ministry. That's a huge statement of faith and loyalty. But they're also frugal. They have a little bit to give, and they don't want you wasting it on giving stuff back to them. Sometimes with these monthly partner programs, we'll send them mugs and all these different things, what I call Jesus junk. Don't bother them with that. They would rather their money goes to the front lines. They're frugal, and you can get to know that about them. Then we have our impulse donors. They don't plan their giving. Whether it's direct mail, you send 12 of them, they might give 3 times 1 year and 2 another, and various months. They do respond to direct mail because they see that as a way to connect with you. They're busy. They don't want to necessarily give at a level that causes you to come in and meet with them. But direct mail and electronic giving is still effective. They do respond to special events. They'll want to come to those. They'll want and to be a part of it, okay? New donors, they have not crossed that psychological hurdle from thinking good thoughts about you, maybe getting your newsletter, maybe haven't even volunteered, but they have not yet given that gift, all right? So, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be is a significant spiritual concept that says when people move from thinking good thoughts to actually becoming an investor in your ministry, there is a hurdle that's crossed. So what we've done now is taken a look at the philosophy a little bit of vision and segmentation and the 4 different types of relationships that everybody fits into. The next step then, we'll look at how do we determine strategies for those sections.
This concludes Session 1. In Session 2, we'll discuss the specific strategies used to connect with each relationship group. Let's continue with Session 2 as we discuss the strategies based on relationships, moving from vision to implementation. And now, here's John R. Frank, President of the Frank Group.
Now that we have looked at who these different relationship possibilities are and we've looked at who they are, let's take a look at how to create strategies to bring our strategies in and say, how do we build a relationship, or which relationship building strategy will work with those people? How do we connect with major donors? Remember, development is creating opportunities to connect God's people to God's work. Our ministry is God's work. What connection is there? Well, we could look at the obvious ones. Well, those are obvious for reasons. One-on-one contact with major donors. A phone call, a personal note, a lunch. Maybe bring them on a tour of your facilities. Maybe if you're national, you have to fly into an area and meet with a couple people or more than that. Maybe you have regional reps. Maybe you're the executive director and you do everything. So how many can you meet with? And maybe that you invite them to a special event, and that starts the relationship, and then you follow up that event. But we must get to know these major donors, and a whole nother complex layer, if you will, to look over these are the age of our major donors. You see, our major donors we get to know the best, or we should. So when we mail to people, we might not know what generation they're from, but when we meet with people, we know whether they're 60, 40, or 20. They're in different stages of their life. They might be a young 30-something multimillionaire in the technology field, or inherited something from their family, or they might be someone at the end of, I don't want to say end of their life, but end of their giving season, and they want to make other types of significant gifts. So it's good, there's different ways to connect with them, but most of them, the most effective ones, will be personal. How do we connect with core donors? the people that desire to give monthly? Well, first of all, I believe one of the main connection strategies is a giving club. Maybe you belong to some, maybe you've created some. But the idea of an inner circle, the idea of a group of people that say, when you commit to give monthly, you are set apart. We want to know who you are. Now, I believe in the clubs and I believe in the names because I believe it presents somewhat of a camaraderie, a spirit, if you will, of people that have joined the Faithful Friends Club or this type of thing, that they are giving on a regular basis. And then there's different types of things we can offer to them. It might be that we do a paper reminder through the mail. But many of our younger donors, and this is important for the next generation of givers, might want to give through electronic funds transfer or through credit card or through the web. And with our monthly partners, when you do it electronically, when you offer that relationship connection, it is 100% fulfillment rates. If you look at it, EFT, credit card, and through the website. And so it is looking at who they are. And again, we could go further into when we started creating these clubs, we looked at the core donors and their big issue was time. When my kids were younger and I was traveling, my wife only had time to write the bills once a month. So if we didn't get the reminder to her, she didn't have time to write bills 4 and 5 times a month. But now with online banking, EFT, credit card, setting it up through the website, my wife looks for as many different ways as that can be automatically done to save her time. So again, I said the core donors are frugal. They're very frugal with their time. How do we connect with impulse donors? Well, these are the donors who maybe don't give as much as the major donors, or they don't give as often as the core donors. But they're still valuable. They still love us. They still want to be connected. But they're a little bit more impulsive, a little bit more random. So we have to create more strategies. That's one of the reasons that many ministries will send 12 appeals, one every month. And for some reason, some people think, well, it's kind of holier than thou, I'll only send 4. If you look at it with impulse donors, with the amount of time they look at their name on the envelope, open it up, read their name again, the PS, the first paragraph, read it through, find the response device, fill it out, and find their checkbook, find a stamp, and mail it in, any number of those psychological hurdles, they could say no. And in fact, a successful direct mail appeal can be anywhere from 5 to 7 or 8%. And in the prime giving seasons of the fall, it might get to 15 to 20%. That means anywhere from 80 to 95% of your direct mail donors don't give on a given month. But yet it's still successful, yet it still brings in a great ROI, and many ministries are provided for by it. But you have a donor that might give January, July, and December. Another one goes through all those hurdles on Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Another one does this, this, and this. So the point is, if you only send it quarterly, you are assuming that all of your donors will go through all those psychological hurdles on those 4 times a year. Not very good odds on that happening. So that is why many ministries go by frequency to allow enough opportunities. And special events. They become the connection strategy. We go to the auction every year. We bring our friends to the auction. We're involved with the Jogathon or any number of, there's a concert series. We go to that. That's how we do our giving. Those are all good. But they tend to be short-term and generally smaller gifts, which are okay. They're needed. But they also, again, are an entry point for other types of giving. So that's that type of relationship, more impulse. And then new donors. Some rent lists and mail letters saying, hey, you don't know us, but we're this ministry. Would you like to consider with a small gift? Others go out on speaking engagements to churches and service groups and always take a clipboard, try and get people's names and addresses, emails. Now it's important to get emails for everything because more and more we're moving to being able to electronically communicate with donors. And that, quite honestly, the electronic email donor, at this early stage, we are finding that they are involved in all of these levels. Major donors, core donors, and impulse donors, and even new donors are involved through electronics. So we're still learning things on age as well as how they respond through these different levels. But new donors is a new donor acquisition strategy. We used to think they came in smaller gifts and moved up the donor pyramid. We do find now that there are relationship strategies for new donors from major donors into major donors. Other monthly partners will bring in other monthly partners, and likewise impulse donors. So as we look at new donor strategies, that's one of the hardest ones to be sure of, because a direct mail acquisition, a successful response rate will be 1 to 2%. Very high cost getting a new name on your file, okay? So when we've done this, we combine all the information, we create strategies for all the different levels. This would allow us to not, as they say, put all our eggs in one basket. If a major donor didn't give 1 year, we would have other strategies to balance that out. And so the idea is a comprehensive group of strategies that loves every level of donor, as well as gives an integrated strategy to your organization. Now, let's put this into some action, and let's put this into some tools that will give us measurement, that will give us measurable numbers, something that most development departments I've found do not have, and that is projected income by source. We're going to consider the trends of the last few years. We're going to project 3 to 5 years of income projections or giving projections by source. And then we're going to consider the budget for each one of those. What does it cost us to raise those dollars? But again, we're going to be doing it in a consistent format of major donors, core donors, impulse donors, and new donors. And then we'll consider variables. Do we need to jump up a certain level in year 3? Do we have a capital campaign coming in year 4? Do we need to add a staff member here at this point because we're bringing in a new development program? All that will go into a 5-year plan. Now in this document, which you will see here, now we will look at all these different groups and be able to look at still our major donors, core donors, impulse donors, and new donors. And what you'll see by the 5 years is that each connection strategy or development, fundraising, stewardship strategy is now set up by the grouping of relationships. So all the major donor strategies are listed, all the monthly partner strategies are listed, the impulse donor strategies are listed, and the new donor strategies are listed. We look at year 1 and we figure out, sometimes when you move to this, there's a lot of translation into which strategy, because most ministries have looked at designations where the money goes rather than what brings it in. But in development, it doesn't help us just to know where the money was put. We need to know the source of what brought it in so that we can adjust those strategies with knowledge and data, not just gut reaction, I think we need to change something. So this has given us data of projections that we're going to compare results to. Now, the first time you do this, don't expect to be right on with your numbers. You're going to look at this and do year 1 and think you're pretty close. Then you'll lay out 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I pretty much guarantee you that when you get to year 2, you're going to find that you have to readjust those numbers. That's okay. When it comes to relationships, it's very difficult to kind of move, well, this person was a major donor, but they came to our special event. So do we put them in the special event number on their impulse, or do we put them in major donors? You have to analyze that and just make sure you do not count things twice. But this will be a very important starting point of taking all your strategies, taking your history of giving that you've received, and putting those into these categories, and then projecting growth. What are some of the considerations for projecting growth? Well, if we're doing 4 direct mail appeals and we move to 6, what is our response rate? And we might make more for that. If we've done no major donor personal contact and now we start to do it, well, we should see some increases. Maybe we're going to hire another major donor representative to be out in the field, et cetera, et cetera. You look at tangible, realistic variables, that's kind of an oxymoron, realistic, tangible variables. But from those things in development, you'll be able to look at when we need to bring in a new staff person. Here is a very beneficial or a benefit from this, is that when you go to add a staff person, you'll be saying, based on income projections, we will need a new staff person, rather than, I think if we hire someone, we might bring in more income. And this is the tool that helps you do that. So now that we've projected 5 years, we're going to look at the coming year, an annual projected income. And we're going to look at every one of the strategies from major donors to core donors, etc. Now in year 1, you may not be doing all of the strategies. You may be adding some new strategies in year 2, 3, 4, and 5, especially if you're a startup or a smaller organization. For some of the larger organizations, you may say we need to stop doing some and refine or use our resources in a more efficient manner. This is based on the approved budget. This is a budget for what we have to spend in development, because it costs money to raise money, and the projected income that we need. So then we will take those annual goals and we'll say, so how do we implement those? We now have some numbers, we have them by relationships. What do we do with them? And we put those into an annual strategy where we're going to look at each strategy. We're going to look at when do we need to do this strategy to achieve the goals. In other words, if we say we're moving from 4 direct mail appeals to 6, which months? And in those mailing schedules, how will they conflict with invitations to the annual auction, etc., etc. We will look at those together. We will look month to month for a whole 12 months as a team, and it might be something as simple as this, an Excel spreadsheet. But the thing I want you to notice is, take a look along the left column. It's still done by major donors, core donors, impulse donors, and new donors. We follow the same format. But now instead of looking at just the individual strategies for 5 years, we've done it to 1 year. We said to reach the 1-year goals, we need to do the following strategies on which months in order to achieve those goals. So if we set a goal for major donors, we have to then have the strategies to reach that goals. And likewise, if we say we want to earn this much from the core donors, we need to find a recruit those core donors into the monthly partner program, etc., etc. And so now you've taken the projections for 5 years, you're into 1 year, and you're putting that into a calendar. And the next step will be, as we go into how do we report this and how do we evaluate this, to know that our development strategic planning by relationship is truly bringing us the most effective ROI.
This concludes Session 2. In our next session, we'll consider the reports and analysis needed in your development strategy to determine your effectiveness and wise stewardship of your relationships. Let's continue with Session 3. In this final session, we'll discuss how to report and analyze the responses to your relationship strategy to determine your effectiveness and ROI. And now here's John R. Frank, President of the Frank Group.
Now that we have finished implementing programs and strategies and built relationships with our donors, how do we know if they've been effective? How do we know if they have good ROI, if it was a good use of our time and investment, as well as do those relationships like what we've done? Reporting. We're going to take a look at the ways to report and analyze to know, have we gotten the results we wanted to get? Under summary reports, which will take a look at maybe all of the different relationship groups and strategies, we're going to look at such things as the number of gifts. How many gifts did we get this year? How many did we give last year? How many gifts did we get in this month this year and last year at comparison, okay? When we do this type of major donor contact or a major donor special event, did it produce this kind of results, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be evaluating. Then we'll be looking at total income. Again, as I said before, gross income, not just the net income. Then under each of the projects, we'll look at specific reports for that strategy. When you evaluate direct mail, we'll look at the number of mail, the number of responses, what's the percentage response rate, what's the average gift size, et cetera, et cetera. Under major donors, it's a little bit different. You don't just look at the total number of dollars. There might be a major donor who says, I'm going to give you a $10,000 gift every 3 years. Well, if we only look at the annual result, we'll say, well, years 2 and 3, we lost a donor. No, actually, if we look at it long term in terms of relationship, we have a donor every 3 years who gives every 3 years. And so the major donor report needs to show not just the results, but the activity. How many people did we meet with? How many tours did we give? How many new major donors? How many donors increased their giving, et cetera, and go deeper into those things. And then special events. One of the things about special events is we tend to maybe not analyze them enough. We just look at, well, did we have enough people there and did it make enough money? But there's many more things. How many were new donors there? How many possible giving units were there? If we had 500 people and couples were invited, you start with only 250 possible givers. And then you take out staff and board, et cetera, et cetera. Then we might look at, what was the ask? Was it an ask for gifts that night? Did we allow them to give a gift, make a pledge for later, monthly partner, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a number of ways to analyze a special event, especially as we look at the priorities. Is the goal the income? Is the goal new donors? Or is the goal appreciation or awareness? Again, as we're looking at relationships, all those can be goals and all those should be prioritized. So in a special event report, you want to look at it that way. Now, with any type of report, it can get very complex, but you need to simplify it in these ways. You want to pull the data out of your database and put it in an Excel spreadsheet type situation where you can analyze it, and then you take summaries of that to give to the board. Well, that isn't meant to be a backhanded insult to say that boards can't understand complex issues, but the point is most boards won't take the time to analyze it. So you in the development, maybe if you have a board development committee, can analyze it, but then you give them a summary of this. So this report is meant for the development team, and once again, as you look, we start with the major donor strategies, then the core donors, impulse, and then the new donors below. But we look at a variety of things to measure. For example, the first thing we're going to measure is the number of gifts. As I said earlier, we're going to look at gifts during this month compared to a year ago the same month. If we're April, we'll look at April last year. Then we look at cumulative number of gifts this year, last year. The other side of it is actual dollar amounts of the gifts. What did our major donor program bring in this year compared to last year? Do we have more major donor gifts, less major donor gifts? What if we have less major donors gifts, but we have a higher amount? They're giving larger gifts. Why? Is it because of a relationship building techniques, or did we lose some major donors as well? And et cetera. You will analyze it through this type of report. Now that we have all the data and results from our reports, we can go on to strategy evaluation. This is critical, that we not just look at what we did as sending out development strategies to our relationships, but when we see how they responded, we look back and say, were we successful? So first we have to define what is success for each strategy. We must look at, is this something that should be producing results immediately? And did it get the results we want? The ROI, did we spend this much and get this much result? Are there some things that it's going to take a number of years to develop? For example, a special event. Just because you start a golf tournament the first year and you're one of 100 golf tournaments in your community doesn't mean that you're going to have a full field the first year. It might take 2 or 3 years, that type of thing. So you must, in each of the new strategies that you're adding, consider what it means to be successful. And then there's other strategies that must respond right away. If you have a very mature direct mail program, you must get results immediately. You don't have time to keep, waiting for it to return. However, if you make a major change in your direct mail strategy, whether it be working with a direct mail firm, maybe you bring it back in-house, you have to give time for your donors to adjust to that as well. So we must look at strategy evaluation. Then, putting this all together in a written plan, a document, not a huge 3-ring binder that's going to sit on a shelf and never get used, but rather a document that has some components that people can refer to on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. When a new person comes in, they can look at this, know exactly what development is all about in your ministry. So for each strategy, there must be the following items. We must look at the purpose. What's the purpose of direct mail? To raise money? Much more than that. It must be building a relationship with donors who want a connection with your ministry through the mail. What's the purpose of a newsletter? Stewardship ROI. Let them know what is being given and what has been accomplished, what God has done through your ministry. So we're going to look at each strategy must have a purpose. Then it must be described. We will hold the following major donor events seeking to have this type of scenario where we're going to talk to people, make a presentation. What are the goals? Well, we hope to have 6 to 20 people there. We hope to cultivate 3 new major donors. But as with major donor programs, just because they have an event, they don't always give a gift at the event, but they might cultivate that and they'll give it by the end of the year, as in most major donors do most of their giving in November and December. Then you might have projected income. All right, through the year we're going to do 6 of these major donor small dinners or small desserts or something. We project over the year that they will bring in $30,000 total. All right, and then you put them in the calendar. When will they take place? What is the budget? How much will they cost? Well, if we have in someone's country club or someone's home, or if one of our board members picks up the cost, we have invitations. What does it cost to put on that major donor dinner? And the budget for that. And the final thing, how do we determine success? Again, looking at the small major donor dinner or dessert type thing, attendance might be a goal, an evaluation, dollar amounts, pledges, but also cultivation of donors that were maybe just barely knew us are now much closer, or some donors are up their giving. Again, determine how you determine success. And again, if you're in the first year of a major donor program, say, well, we've put some good fundamentals in place. But if you're in the 10th year of your major donor program, you're going to have higher standards from which to evaluate through and make sure that they happen. You have a development strategic planning concept now. You look at the different components that you can put them together and start to say, well, relationships that are either major donors, core donors, impulse donors, or new donors. Makes sense. Relationships. Let's pick some strategies. But it seems overwhelming right now. So again, there's some simple starting points. First of all, begin now. Don't wait till next year or whatever. The only time I would say that it's difficult to plan is if you're in the fall giving season and you're reviewing this training right now. It's pretty difficult to start that. But otherwise, get started right now and start simple. Just take the 5-year projections form and look at which strategies you have in each of the 4 relationship groups. Right now, which strategies are you doing? And work those out and then see which years can you add the new ones. The second component to start out with would be your annual calendar. So with the flow chart in the beginning that showed the whole process as being number 1, the second being the 5-year projections, and the third being the 1-year annual calendar, those 3 tools are the starting point for your development strategic planning by relationship. And you can complete the plan over time as you get the new numbers in year 2. And how you see it all working together. But remember our goal in doing development strategic planning by relationships. It is about the steward, is about doing God-honoring ministry to the donors. So our goal is to create a comprehensive relationships, build strategies at every relationships, really honor our people. Integrated development strategy. They work together, all of these. That honors God, follows His word. We know we can stand before Him and say, we did this to build relationships with your stewards. But we complete the task. And we're going to measure it. We're going to project it. We're going to analyze it. We're going to work like crazy to use the infrastructure of our organization, of the development department, and help our organization be efficient and effective in reaching their Frontlines ministry goals. And in the process, our donors will feel that they've been ministered to, they've been connected with, they've been listened to, and they're well informed of what God is doing in the ministry that they are stewards of. And then we will truly be honoring God in this and be using a development strategic plan that uses relationships. So I wish you God's best as you go forward in this and find that the relationships are really the key to an effective development strategic plan. Thank you.
This concludes the Development Strategy by Relationships teaching series produced by the Frank Group. To learn more about stewardship and development, and for additional resources, books, and DVDs, please visit www.thefrankgroup.us. For the Frank Group, I'm Bill Brubaker.